anywhere this morning, but God saw fit to put us on this day whereby we can come and praise and worship the Lord and fellowship with one another. Amen. You could have been anywhere this morning. I always tell you, you could have been in an insane asylum. You could have been in a hospital. You could have been home alone just wondering, are you all by yourself? You could have been under the bridge, homeless, but God saw fit to make it possible for you to be amongst the body of believers praising and worshiping the Lord. What a wonderful, magnificent day, for this is the day that the Lord has made. We shall rejoice and be glad in it. Don't let anyone take this day away from you. God gave it to you. And God gave you peace and joy and enjoy yourself. And don't let anyone take it from you or you don't give it away. Amen? We're going to find ourselves in the book of Luke this morning. Luke chapter 16. Luke chapter 16, verses 1 to 13. Luke chapter 16. And we're in a series now called Ching. And we're talking about money and the use of money and the significance of money in our lives. And this morning we're going to look at the good steward. The good steward. Now, if you have a dollar bill or a dollar bill in your pocket, just pick it up. I want you to just look at it good this morning. Just take a good look at it if you have one. Just hold it to your face and take a look at it and just imagine what it is. A $20 bill. You see, all of us, we might not want to admit it, all of us are concerned about money. We are concerned about money. And the saddest thing about it is that we don't want to talk about it at the dinner table. We don't want to talk about it in the bedroom. We don't want to talk about it in the church. The only time we want to talk about it is when we don't have it. Then it becomes a central topic in all that we see. So I want you to come to grips with that we're going to have to learn in our lives how to manage money. We got to learn that. Unfortunately, few of us ever like to manage our money. Now, this series that we are in is not about the church and tithing and offering, but it's about you. And I want you to come to grips with the reality is that you got to manage your money, or your money's going to manage you. You got to manage your money, or your money's going to manage you. Now, there are a bunch of people who say, look, the government takes my money. The government takes a portion of your money. There are a whole other group of people who say, I don't go to church because all the church want is my money. The question for you and I, as we look at this, and as we give and as we receive, what benefits that we get from giving? What does it cost us to give? You know, everybody has a plan. You know, in life we all have plans. We have a plan for this, a plan to go to school, a plan to graduate, or a plan to have a family, a plan to have kids, a plan to go on a cruise like Pastor Williams is on to this morning. God bless him, and hopefully he enjoys it. But we wanted to plan for everything in our lives. But we don't have a plan. We don't have a plan to learn how to give. And that's a tragedy, because it's so important that we learn how to give. And it's so important that giving stops being a second thought in our minds. Giving is basically a second thought in our minds. As a matter of fact, it's a tug of war for us to give to someone. It's like tugging against doing it and not doing it. And we spend all of our lives in this tug of war because we cannot manage money. You see, the Bible talks about money, the management of money, almost more than it talks about anything else. As a matter of fact, if you look at the Gospels, they talk about prayer about 500 times. And the Bible talks about money management and money-related things over 2,500 times. So we ask ourselves, why did Jesus spend so much time talking about money and stuff and investments and how we need to deal with it. So the reason why Jesus spent so much time with that is because Jesus knew that we would have to manage the resources that we have. Because what happens is that when we don't manage the resources that we have, as we talked about the last time, we can start viewing those resources as a liability instead of an asset. We can start viewing those resources as a liability instead of an asset. And what happens is that when we start to just spend all of our time and all our resources and all our money on stuff, it's the stuff that becomes more important in our lives than the things that we can do with the stuff. And I want you to step back this morning and sort of, we always talk about perception and perspective and focus. And, we always talk about the fact that wrong perception, wrong perspective, wrong focus. So in this series that we've been in the last 2 weeks, I want you to see the significance that Jesus put on our ability to manage what he gives us. And oftentimes, you may not believe this, but how we manage the time, talent, and resources that God gives us oftentimes will tell us what kind of rewards we'll have in heaven. Never thought about that, haven't you? You haven't thought about the fact that how we manage the resources that God gives us. And that's why Jesus spent so much time talking about how to manage money, the significance of it, and how we, as believers, shouldn't be obsessed with it, because Jesus wasn't obsessed with it. He was just trying to lay a platform and a protocol out for us so we can understand it. He realized how significant it was going to be in our earthly life. So as this is significant in our earthly life, and if we manage it right in our earthly life, we're going to find that the rewards in heaven are going to be magnified. Pastor Heike, you said it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not telling you that you can buy your way to heaven. We taught that 500 years ago. That was one of the most significant contributions to the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther tried to prove, and he did prove from a biblical perspective, you can't buy your way to heaven. That's not what I'm talking about this morning. And I want you to I've been watching this series on TV called The Good Doctor. Excellent series. And it shows about this kid who has he's challenged. Brilliant, but he's challenged. And how he looks at things from a whole different perspective, and how he sees things the way other doctors don't see it, and how he's able to solve problems that other doctors just look over. So what I want you to step back today, and I want you to look at this parable that Jesus tells, and I want you to just pretend that you're the Good Samaritan. You could see things a little bit differently than other people see it. You're not going to see how diabolical, how deceptive, how manipulating, how conniving, how untrustworthy, how lying, what kind of dog this steward really is. I don't want you to look at it from that perspective. I want you to look at it as the glass being half full instead of half empty. Now remember those adjectives I used, and I used them for a reason. Remember, I'm not just throwing it out there. It's going to come to grips to you. It's going to just sink in. Let's look at it. Luke 16 and 14, and the setting is clear. And this is a parable that my little grandbaby inside of his mother's womb, he's out now, he can understand it if you read it to him. So it's not that complex. And Jesus makes it plain, clear, and simple. Luke 16 and 14. Look what he says. Now the Pharisees, who were lovers of money, were listening to all these things, and they were scoffing at him. Think about that. We don't like to talk about money and resources. And Jesus said the same thing. Remember, the Pharisees were the most learned people of their day. They understood the Bible. They understood finance. They understood the culture. They were supposed to be the purveyors of righteousness, truth, and justice. They were supposed to be the purveyors of what was good. But as Jesus is talking about money, they are scoffing or ridiculing. And we do the same thing. When anybody starts to approach us about managing the resources that God has given us, our disposition is we want to tune them out. No matter how many degrees you have, MBA, PhD, doctorate degree, no matter what you have, you figure you can just tune it out when people start talking to you about this. When you listen to someone tells you that your ratio to income and expenses should be 7-30, you say, that man is a fool. But yet every time you go try to borrow something, every time you try to buy something, everything you do is tied to that ratio. If you are exceeding that 70-30 ratio, what do you mean by that, Pastor? You're supposed to live off of 70% of what you earn. 70% of what you earn is what you're supposed to live off. 30%, 10% of it should go back to tithes and offerings. 10% should go back to an investment. 10% should go to a saving. And if you use that formula, within 10 years, you will have as much as you started out with that first year if you use that formula. The 70-30 rule. But when people talk about it, you say to yourself, well, man, I should be able to live off of 100% of what I earned. I earned it. That's what these Pharisees were saying. What are you talking about? Why are you talking about that? See, the main reason that Jesus tells this parable is that he wanted us, and he wanted them at that time to realize that you can use your earthly riches to gain eternal rewards. Listen to what I said. You can use your earthly riches to gain eternal rewards. Well, Pastor, what are you saying about that? A little while ago you said you can't buy your way to heaven. You can't buy your way to heaven. That's a gift from God through his grace and his mercy. But because you are in heaven, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to receive the rewards that everybody else receives. So there's a reason why you go before that white throne judgment. That's a whole nother message. See, Jesus is telling us here, we ought to be accountable for managing what God gives us, and we shouldn't be careless with it. We got to be accountable for the time that God gives us. You got 168 hours, and you won't contribute 3 of those hours back to doing what God has in his plan for you to do. You have all the talent in the world, but yet you wouldn't give any of that talent to write a newsletter about what's going on in the church or what's going on in the ecumenical community so somebody else can understand it. God has rewarded you with all of the money that you could possibly use, but you say it's all mine. Now watch this story. Jesus sort of deals with it so you can understand it. And pay close attention to it, because this story is going to have a surprising twist for some of us. And it's going to have a shocking ending for some of us. Because I don't know, and as we were preparing this, the Lord exposed some little trinkets to me that I hadn't seen before. Now watch this. Verse 16, chapter Luke 16:1. Now he was also saying to his disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager. Now pay attention. And the manager was reported to him as squandering his possessions. So he had put this manager in charge over his business or his house. And he got a report that the manager was squandering the things that he gave. You see that? Now, back in those days, in biblical days, normally a person would hire what we call a steward to manage their house, manage their estate, or manage their business. And they gave you complete control over managing their estate or their property. I mean, you had complete control over the assets. You could determine what business transactions happened. You could determine who was a debtor, who was a creditor, and everything was under your control. You managed the assets as effectively as possible. Now, that verse that we just read is a reflection of you and a reflection of me. Because I can almost guarantee that most of us have not been good stewards of the time, the talent, and the resources that God has given you and me. And how can I say that? Because we assume that when we have something, it belongs to us. Now, we've seen in this series that God owns everything. God is in charge of everything. So when you own something, when you're in charge of it, every now and then you do what's called an audit. You go in and you audit what's going on. So apparently here, this manager, like us, made an assumption that no one was watching him, no one was paying attention to him, so he can do what he wanted, how he wanted with those assets. But we all are being watched by somebody. And God is watching you, and God is watching me. And you will have an audit, and I will have an audit, and we will have to account for all that we've done with the resources that God has given each and every one of us. And that's exactly what happens in verse 2. Let's look at it. And the manager called him and said to him, watch this. What is this that I hear about you? But Jesus just, it's magnificent how he put these things. Give an accounting of your management. For you can no longer be a manager. You see, I don't know all what's going on there, and I suspect that maybe he made some bad investments, some miscalculations. I don't know, but the book shows that he didn't manage the resources that God gave him properly. Now, why is that so important? Romans 14:12 tells us, each of us will have to give a personal account to God. Did you hear that? Each one of us will have to give a personal account to God. So everything that God has entrusted me with and everything that God has entrusted you with, we're going to have to account for that. And we never take that into perspective when we're using our time, talent, and resources. That there's going to be an audit. There's going to be an audit of your life that's going to determine what did you do with the time, talent, and resources that God gave you. Today we're talking about the resources. I'm reminded of a story about Leoma Helser. You know, she was the billionaire that ended up going to jail for tax evasion. As she was looking at her will, she noticed that she had left $12 million to trouble. So she called her lawyers and the CPA and said, look, do I have a grandson or granddaughter named Trouble? And the CPA said, no, that's your dog. She left $12 million to her dog called Trouble. Just imagine how many kids you can feed, how many kids you can send to college, how much that you could do with $12 million. But she was such a bad manager what God gave her, she left $12 million to trouble her dog. Now you look at Leoma Helser and you say, well, how can a woman do that? Why would she do that? Remember, I always suggest to you, don't reflect, inflect. You see, it's easy for us to reflect on other people. We can reflect on Leoma Helser, but we can't inflect on the $35,000, $40,000 that God has put in our life, that we spend at the bingo hall, that we spend on lottery tickets, that we throw away more money than we ever dreamed on games of chance than anything else. But you can laugh at Leoma Helser leaving $12 million to a dog Trouble, but you don't laugh at the $2,000 that you paid on lotto cards and bingo cards. You see how you got to inflect instead of spending all your time reflecting? Amen. So it's easy for us to look at other people mismanaging their resources, but it's hard to look at us. See, God wants you and me to be responsible managers. God wants you and me to manage the resources that he gives us wisely. Now let's look at this. Luke 16, verse 4 through 7. There's something about this steward that he's sort of, now don't, remember I said he's diabolical, he's lying, he's manipulating, he's calculating. Don't forget that. But we want to look at the glass as being half full instead of half empty. he comes to his senses. He realizes, hey, Doc, somebody's been watching me. I'm being audited. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be out of a job pretty soon. See, there's going to be a day when you are no longer as productive as you are today. And some company or some business will have used your time, talent, and resources for 30 years. And you're going to wake up at 55, and they're going to be looking for another 24-year-old like Shantae to take your place. All right now. All right now. So we said ourselves, oh no, nothing's going to happen to me. Oh yeah, something's going to happen. So God wants us to be responsible. So this lying, diabolical, stealing, manipulating steward, which is us, comes up with a plan in mid-course. Look what he says. I know how to ensure that I have plenty of friends who will give me a home when I'm fired. So he invited these persons who owed money to his employer to come and discuss the situation. Remember I told you he was in control of everything, debit, credits, and everything. And he asked the first one, how much do you owe him? The man replied, I owed him 800 gallons of olive oil. So the manager told him, take the bill and quickly changed it to 400 gallons. Cut it in half. And how much do you owe my employer? Asked another. And he asked the next man, I owe him 1,000 bushels of wheat. Watch this. So to apply here, the manager said, take the bill and change it to 800 bushels. Now let me sort of explain to you what's going on there. The interest rate on oil at that time was 100%. So he cut the interest rate in half. The interest rate on borrowed wheat was about 25%. So he cuts that by 25%. What he is doing is he's transforming debt into interest. But he's transforming the debt into interest not for the owner of the goods and services, but in anticipation for himself. He's making friends. He's transforming to make sure that when he is fired or later on, he has some friends, pay attention to that, who's going to look out for him. Now, when you look inside of this, I said we got to look at the glass as being half full and not half empty. Now watch this. Look at verse number 8. This is hard for us to do, but remember, Jesus is telling this story for a particular reason. And you have to understand that. And the Lord, and that's not Jesus, that's his master, commended the unjust servant because he had done wisely. For the children of this world are in this generation wiser than the children of the light. He's doing something here that's wise. He's making preparations for later on. See, few of us make preparation for later on. And the Lord and the owner saying to him, look, you're a shrewd brother. You're doing something today to take care of tomorrow. You're doing something today, he was taking care of tomorrow. He's getting ready for when he has no more paycheck. He knew that he needed something or somebody to fall back on who would help him. Hear what I said. He needed somebody or someone to fall back on to help him later on. In other words, he did what he needed to do today in order to get ready for what was coming tomorrow. I want you to pay attention to that. Now, he's wise because what he's doing, he's using somebody else's assets to prepare for his future. You always hear people say, use other people's money. So he's being shrewd. He's dealing with, he's wise. He's saying, I'm going to deal with today with what the stuff that I have to get ready for the coming tomorrow. So he's being wise. Now, did he own that? Did he own it? No. But he was being wise. Do you own anything in this universe? Are you wise about the stuff that God has put into your life? No. And that's why this Lord can look back and say, although he's a thief, although he's diabolical, although he's a liar, although he's a manipulator, because God knows your heart, the Lord is saying he's clever. And the question for you and me is, how clever are we with the stuff that we don't know? How are we using the time, talent, and resources that God has given us? Are we clever or are we stupid? You see, one thing I want you to leave from here this morning is that you and I both have a chance to use what God has given us today on this earth to make sure that it works for you and me tomorrow and in eternity. If we use the time, talent, and resources that God has given you and I, we can make sure that we're taking care of today, we're taking care of tomorrow, and in eternity we receive our rewards. Because what happens is that you can buy stocks, bonds, real estate, whatever you want. If you misuse this stuff or you mismanage this stuff, and you don't tie it to what's called a giving plan, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. If you don't tie it to a giving plan, and it never ceases to amaze me how a person can make a retirement plan. They can make a savings plan. There's some of us who even have what you call a buying plan. We put so much money on the side so we can buy things for Christmas. Yeah. A buying plan. But we never put together a giving plan. And why is it so important to put together a giving plan? Because God is telling us that the resources that he's given to you and I are not just for us. We will be commended for managing what God gives us faithfully if we do it. We will be commended for that. And look at what Jesus says in Luke 16:9. So I want you to understand what he's saying, because Jesus is very particular. He's careful in his narrative, and I use the word narrative, and I'm going to use the word narrative and story today, because a narrative determines mindset. It's how you understand the narrative determines your mindset. And story, a story is that, a story. A narrative resets. A story just says something to you. Watch this. Here's the lesson that Jesus made clear here. Luke 16:9. He says, hear the lesson. It's not like rocket science. It's not something mystical. He just says, hear the lesson. Use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. Did you hear that? See what Jesus says? He says, use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. What did that steward do? Made friends. Now, Jesus didn't say you own it. He says, use the operative word. Because remember, you're a manager and a steward of what God has put in your life. You don't own nothing. You didn't create anything. Nothing belongs to you. Matter of fact, your life don't even belong to you. Your soul don't even belong to you. Because either your soul going to be in heaven or it's going to be in that pit of fire and brimstone. So does it belong to you? Hear the lesson. Use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. Now, how many of us do that? Now, watch the transition out. Then, when your earthly possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home. Isn't that profound? You see, everything you have on this planet, negative to this world I came, negative to this world I'm going to go out. There's a thing on this planet that belongs to you or belongs to me. See, you can't take no money with you. You can't take no house with you. You can't take no stocks and bonds. There's nothing in this universe you can take with you. So why not invest your money wisely? Why not invest your time wisely? Why not invest your talents wisely? Because the only thing that's going to benefit you is your ability to give to other people. It's the only thing that's going to benefit you in heaven. It's the only thing. See, God didn't give you everything you have for you. He gave you what you have to manage it, to glorify him, and to make yourself better. Of course, God wants you to have a good quality of life. Why would he allow man to create air conditioning if he didn't want you to have air conditioning? But he don't want you to make the air conditioning the most important thing in your life, and you spend $1,000 a month to air condition a 1,000 square foot home. Something wrong with that. It's crazy. Jesus is telling you and I the best investment that we can make, the only thing that's going to be there in eternity, are the souls of men, women, boys, and girls. When you get to heaven, that's what's going to be there. And we spend all of our time trying to find secure places for our money, trying to find a good rate of return. And Jesus is telling you and I the best benefit, the best security, the best rate of return is for you to invest in other people. He's telling you and I, he's telling you that God don't want us to give so that we become poor. Listen to what I'm saying. God don't want us to give so we can become poor. He really wants us to give so we can become richer. Now, Pastor, that don't make any sense. If it doesn't make any sense, you're not paying attention. Now, let's go back and clarify a couple of things. Well, God is telling you and I that the things that he has given us, the most secure place we can be, the most diversified we can be. You see, we look to invest in mutual funds, stocks and bonds, 401k plans, we look for diversity. God is saying develop a diversity plan called giving. Yeah. And when you give, and people go out and do missionary work, evangelical work, evangelist work, and they go out and spread the good news, and they bring people to Christ, that's true giving. And he's telling you and I, in verse 9, it's very clear that he's telling us that when we give from our hearts, when we glorify God in our giving, and we make ourselves better in our giving, there's going to be a day when you're going to be in heaven, and you're going to have touched somebody that you didn't even know. And they're going to come up to you, and they're going to say, thank you for investing in my life. When you invested in my life, you changed my life. When you introduced me to Christ, you changed my life. When you allowed me to study with you, to pray with you, to meditate with you, to worship with you, you changed my life. And there are going to be people in heaven that you never met. But because you planted those seeds, they're going to also come up to you and say, thank you. You see, when you invest in God's work, you're literally making a gift that keeps on giving back to you. I'll say it again. When you invest in God's work, you are making a gift that keeps on giving back to you, not to somebody else. And that's the gift that keeps on giving that most of us don't understand. Now, what I'm saying to you is that when you learn how to give, you will have an eternal impact, oftentimes that you don't even know about. When you learn how to give, you're going to have an eternal reward that you didn't anticipate. Think about that. And when Jesus is telling you and I in this parable, he's telling us plainly clear, how can I use the stuff that God has given me to the greatest eternal impact and the greatest eternal reward? That's what he's telling us. And he's making it plain and clear. And let me put it another way. How are you going to use the stuff that God has given you that won't last for people that will last? How are you going to use the stuff that's given you that won't last for people that will last? Pastor, what do you mean? Those people in heaven with you? That's going to be everlasting. Moth and rust and manipulation and deception and lying, eventually going to touch all the stuff that you have some way, somehow. And Jesus is telling you and I the stuff for things that will last. Look what he tells us in Luke 16, 10 and 11. I want you to see the twist here. I want you to see the climactic statement that Jesus will use here. Watch this. Now you've heard it and you've read it and you've seen it. But as I was praying and meditating and studying this, something stuck out that hasn't stuck out before. Watch this. He who is faithful in very little things is also faithful in much. And he who is unrighteous in very little things is unrighteous also in much. Now you've heard that before, haven't you? Therefore, if you have not been faithful in the use of righteousness wealth, who will entrust the true riches to you? Now I want you to step back and look at it very closely. He who is faithful in very little things. Did you notice how Jesus calls money a very little thing? Did you ever pick that up? A very little thing. When he's telling you that, if you can't be faithful in this little thing, I'm going to reward you with these eternal rewards, these big things. If you cannot be faithful in the little things, as a matter of fact, you cannot be faithful in the little things that you don't own. So why in the world I'm going to trust you with riches in eternity? Why? You didn't take care of the little things. So when you look at these verses, look at what he's telling us. He said, he who is faithful in very little things. It starts with the little things. It's also faithful in much. If you can't deal with the little, stop asking God for the much. If on earth you can't deal with giving and impacting and empowering people, glorify God, make yourself better. It's all about you. I need. God is saying, develop a giving plan, develop a giving mentality, and see what happens. And we need to teach this to our kids, to our children, our grandchildren. We need to sometimes even teach it to our wives and our husbands. You got to learn how to give in the little things. You want the big things, but learn how to give in the little things. And he's telling us, you don't own it anyway. You're not going to keep it anyway. So he's saying, you got to share. You got to be able to manage the earthly stuff so I can trust you with the eternal stuff. God is saying to you and me every day, I'm giving you these little tests just to see where you are. As a matter of fact, he's saying to you and I give you the answers because I want you to pass the test. And some of us, even with the answers, fail the test. I remember taking a test in school. And Dr. Clark at the beginning of the semester said, look, before you start answering the test, read the questions. And every class, that joker would say that. Before y'all start taking this test, read the questions. You give us a little 10 quiz test about the day before, or the class before. And that class was more about talking and lectures, and he wanted us to be able to intellectually understand things. So he gave us maybe 5 pop quizzes. And he told us, look, these quizzes are just to see where you're at. And he always would say that. And I remember, for the final, all of us walked in class, and Dr. Clark had never given us a 5-page test. Never did. And everybody sat down and they said, man, I can't believe this joker. He's been conning us the whole semester. And for some reason, something told me to start reading from page 5 first. So I go down, and question number 25, I think it was, says, if you have read this question and turned your paper in, you passed this test. If you've not read this question and answered all of the questions, you fail this test. So I circled it and I left out. And about an hour later in the student center, I need not say what happened. But Jesus goes on in verse 13 to tell us, and he says, and that's why I love to just read the gospel. Man, it's just so simple. Look what he tells us in 16 and 13. He says, no servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon or money. You see, and I want to break this down so you can understand. You can't love your mistress and love your wife. Impossible. You can't love your husband and love your lover. It's impossible. You're going to serve one or the other. I just want to give you something you can identify with. Because a lot of times we look at this stuff in abstract. You're going to serve one and despise the other. You're going to serve one and despise the other. You're going to find fault and problems with something where there are oftentimes no fault and problems. And God is telling you and I, you can't have two masters. Either money controls you or God controls you. Either money controls you or God controls you. And you know what? People oftentimes get into deep financial troubles because they've borrowed too much money. Yeah, I've met a lot of people in deep financial trouble because they spent too much. And sometimes I've met people who have got themselves in deep financial trouble for lack of planning. Tell you a little story right quick. We've been coming to a close. I remember my mom passed. And normally you can deal with all kind of things. You know, God has equipped me and taught me to just deal with all kind of things. But I really didn't handle the situation, the stress between my brothers and sisters very well because we had to make some tough decisions. And I remember during that time, after my mom passed, I developed what you call Bell palsy. And it's a stress-related nerve situation. And I remember it very clearly. And I remember I had a disability policy that was supposed to pay so much of mine, and it didn't pay that. And some people advised me, why don't you just file Chapter 13, bankruptcy reorganization, and wipe everything out. Just wipe it all out, start over. And I prayed on it, and I meditated on it, and the Spirit brought in my heart, look, man, if you file Chapter 13 reorganization, all your licenses, all the licenses that you're going to have, you're not going to be able to have them anymore. And the reason why I'm sharing this story, which is that I never met a person who had to file Chapter 11 reorganization because they gave too much. I want you to think about that. You see, we spend all of our lives being slaves to money. We serve the God of stuff. Yes. We serve the God of stuff because we want stuff here, stuff there. You don't see it as a God, but we serve the God of stuff. Ask yourself, how much stuff is enough? And because we serve a God of stuff, we become slaves to money. We become slaves to our time. You're saying, Pastor, why you say that? Just look at it. And I want to ask you a few questions. And this is how you can tell. This is how you can tell where your focus is. Now, it's hard to recognize this God of stuff in ourselves. It's hard. Let me ask you a few questions. Number one, do you really see money as God's money? Or do you see money as my money? question do I think most often about? Or what do I have a passion for, God or money? Answer that question. So if you took 168 hours that God gave you and you spent it all dealing with money, that's what your passion is. Does my credit card, my checkbook, and my bank account show that my priorities are right and that God can trust me with eternal things? Will there be people who welcome me in heaven because how I've used the stuff here on earth? Does God know he can entrust me with eternal riches because I've been faithful with earthly wealth? What really gives me a more accurate picture of my spiritual life? My Bible or my checkbook? Big questions. There's always a turning point. And the question is, are you and I going to take the right turn? You know, I once read a story about a man he was stranded on a desert island. And he thought he was alone on that island. Listen to this story, because this story reflects you. But he came to find out that there were other people on that island. He was the only one. But because he was different, they decided to make him a king when they found him. They put him on the throne, they fed him, they gave him everything that he wanted. And as he came to know their culture and understand them, he began to communicate with them better. And then he came to realize that the one thing about these people, when they made you a king, they made you a king for 1 year. And when that 1 year was up, they would bring you to another deserted island. So as he was sitting there thinking, at first he went into deep depression like some of us go into. And then he came to the realization that I'm a king today. So he called some of the people and then they told him, this is the island that you're going to go on. And then he called some of the workers and he said, I want you guys to go to this island and I want you to build a luxurious house. I want you to plant all kinds of crops and store all kinds of food. I want you to make provisions for later on. So when it came time for him to go to that island, he took a few friends with him. Listen to what I'm saying. When it came time for him to go to that island, he took a few friends with him. And they enjoyed themselves in this new place because they had learned to live today and to prepare for tomorrow. You see, don't get depressed. And hopefully you get this picture that I'm trying to relate to. Now, some of us are going to see this narrative and we're going to say, that won't be me. And others of us are going to see this narrative and we're going to say, that's a great story, Pastor John. You tell great stories. But what I want to tell you today, as we come to a close, when you say to yourself, that will be me, that tells me that your focus is correct. When you say to me, Pastor Jones, you tell good stories, that tells me that your perspective is still wrong. And the key to all of this, Tarek, as we come to a close, is that nothing happens by magic. Nothing is mystical. It's all tied to faith and belief. You had faith when you walked in here this morning that the air conditioner was going to be on, that the lights were going to be on, that you were going to be able to sit in a chair and not fall down. So why not have a little faith in God? Why not say to yourself that God has given me a plan? God has given me a plan that I can have eternal life. God has given me a plan that I can have eternal reward. So I'm going to take that plan and I'm going to use that plan. And I'm going to be very, very faithful. I'm going to be diligent. I'm going to become a good steward. And I'm not going to be a bust. See, the question is for you and me this morning. Are you going to be a good steward? Or are you going to be a bust? Are you going to leave from here this morning being able to see things from a different perspective because your perception has changed and your focus is directed, and it's all tied to your faith? Do you receive that message?